Welcome to She Loves the Grid, where we discuss all things F1. Whether it's happening on the track, in the paddock, or beyond the grid, we'll talk about it all.
Hi, I'm Diane,
And I am Claire.
and welcome to She Loves the Grid, post Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. Saudi Arabia.
It's late. We don't
It's
normally
late.
record this late. It's
We
okay.
don't. Forgive
So
me.
how was
How
your
was your week?
week? I beat you to it.
I know you did. Good. Got my hair did. A little shorter.
I'm loving it. Like I said, you're looking like in a movie assassin.
I know. Assassin. I added bangs for the first time in probably decades, and so I'm not really sure how I feel about that yet. But and if you're watching us on YouTube, or you could go to YouTube and see the new hairdo. Yeah, so that was good, and had family in town for spring training. I am not a Cubs fan. I'm a White Sox fan. If you live in the United States and follow baseball, you know those two don't gel. So, but I do go to these Cubs games once a year with my family to have a good time. I represented with my Carlos Signs t-shirt, and everybody else was in their Cubs gear. And as we're walking in, I see a guy in his Red Bull shirt. I had to holler at him.
That's so awesome.
I had to holler. I'm like, Red Bull, like, where's a Ferrari? And then we accidentally cut in line. There's like a replica of this sign that I guess is at Wrigley Field. And so we accidentally cut in line, and we turn around. We're like, oh my goodness. And the guy said, it's okay. You're wearing a Ferrari shirt. I was like, okay, let me take a picture of you and your family.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it was fun. What about you?
Well, in Berlin, I had my little jacket on because I'm a little chilly. It finally started to warm up. Got to sit out on the patio and enjoy some of the
Nice.
warmth. So you got to brag about your weather last weekend. I get to brag about mine. Wasn't quite in the 70s Fahrenheit, but it did get in close to 60, I think. I think we were like at, I think my watch said 18 Celsius. Somebody can do the math.
Yeah, I don't do the math,
nice.
but I don't do the math.
Out on the
It
sun,
it was pretty.
it was nice. And so much so, my dog was sitting out on the patio that I decided I had to start an Instagram for her because now she's an Instagram model. So
I love it. Give her a shout out. What's her page?
Whittle Wuda.
Whittle Luda.
Whittle Wuda. Yeah. She's named after two Ewoks. So
Yeah.
if you're just because you know me, I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
It's
One of the things I love about you. Just one of them, because there's a million reasons.
Well, it's going to be jam packed. So I guess
I know we got to get to it. We
so
got
much
craziness. Okay, practice. I mean, I don't have a whole lot. I thought it was cool in FP2 that everyone was basically within 1.5 seconds of. Pretty sure it must have been the Red Bulls. I put the leaders is what I wrote down, so it must have been them. So they, Red Bull looking very strong as usual. Alpine started showing some really good pace, and we'll talk about our fantasy league a little bit later. But based on their pace from practice, I switched up my fantasy teams a little bit because I just felt both Ocon and Gasly were looking really good. And the other thing I thought was interesting, and this would have been more in free practice too, that I was noticing this, but Ferrari consistently almost 1 second down from Red Bull, not where they want to be right now at all.
No.
In FP3, we had Nick DeVries did not practice at all, which on a street circuit, you need to be out there. Like those walls there's not a lot of.
They were working on the car, right?
They replaced his power unit. So I just think not the start that Nick DeVries was thinking he was going to have in F1 with a DNF last race, and then not even practicing in FP3. And Yuki's outpacing him. I think we talked about this, and Claire, I know you had said, Yuki or Nick was really ready to come in and take on a leadership role in all aspects.
Yep, he's talked about that in that last season of the Netflix show, that he was going to come in and command the lead and and be it. And, he had all this ability, and,
Yep.
it's been, I mean, it's the car, I mean, and it's been some interesting things for all the cars. I mean, a lot of the
Yeah.
cars, rather,
Yeah.
the last two races, which I don't know how common that is. We've
Yeah.
been talking about parts changing out, and there's been other cars. There was a lot of things that were going on, but to have the whole car being worked on, that was shocking to me to see that happening.
It was, I just feel for him because I think that he does have what it takes to be in F1 driver, but boy, he like this is a test of true character because he's really getting hit hard and having to just persevere and hopefully stay positive and move forward. McLaren wasn't looking too bad in practice, but the other thing that really stood out to me was Max in FP3 on hard tires doing a 129.882 lap, beating the Alpine and the Mercedes on soft tires. So on hards,
Yeah.
now again, practice, you don't know like what setups are, you don't know if somebody's on low fuel, high fuel, like, but at the same time, like on hards, he was 129. That's crazy. Some people were doing that on softs, like even in qualifying. So ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, there's a lot that's being said about the Red Bull cars in it as a whole. So that's really interesting to see that, for sure.
Yeah, I think it just shows they are capable of anything. And as we know, like usually throughout the season, their teams are making improvements on their car and they're tweaking things and doing this and that. So to see them come out this strong, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but to see them come out this strong and know that they could get better if their team is tweaking things throughout the rest of the season. This, I think it was Lewis or somebody said, might have been Martin Brundle, like this literally could be the fastest F1 car in history. Like,
but the question is, could it get better? Right? You wonder what if they've peaked now?
Yeah,
there's that chance too.
Yeah, good thought. Like starts to just go downhill.
We can
never know. You never know. So qualifying Q1.
Yeah, that was. I feel bad about. I know we talked about. I got a list of things to talk about. I really feel bad about Sargent. Like that just. He's had a tough break. I mean, he seems so promising. We talked last, the last race, just his demeanor, and started quiet and where he's at, and then to be working so hard and then hit that spot was at the pink, right? And they kept talking about it, the F1 commentators, about how they were all warned, they were all given that briefing, and they were all provided the information and the rules about that pink area. You couldn't go into that one area, and it was a great time too, right? It was a super fast
1:29, and for sure that would have put him easily into Q2, for sure. But it just, a little bit of his tire was in that, and I know social media was going nuts because people are saying, but his tire was barely in, and but like you just said, they're given that driver's briefing, and you have to read it. And you need to know these things. It's said any part of your car is in this pink, your lap time will be deleted. And that's what happened. So,
and you have practice, right? They had 3 rounds of practice to practice before you go into qualifying. So you get that time to know and get used to the track and get time to know where to avoid and what not to do.
Exactly.
I mean, I understand it's a crazy course with 20-something turns, right? So you
27. It's the most turns in any course or circuit, whatever, any Grand Prix this season. So, and it's at the end, and it's kind of on a straight, but still, like giant pink area. Avoid it. Make sure you're.
I avoid pink.
Avoid it. The other thing that happened in Q1 that stood out was Norris just randomly touching the inside wall with the front driver's tire.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I didn't suffer damage.
Yeah, no, he had to go in. He was out. Like, right. They had to work on his car, but I think on that course and a lot of street courses, like I am just holding my breath half the time when they come around and they're inches, like millimeters away from the outside wall. But Lando somehow turns in on the inside wall and hits that. And then that's it for him. Q1 is over. He has to take it back and they've got to work on it.
Well, you look at the speeds that they're going by too, and it reminds me of driving like a truck down the highway or a car down the highway, and you have the highway barriers. I just can't imagine how fast they're going. But like you said, to your point, like the inside,
Yeah.
the outside's one thing, but the inside when you're on that, I don't know. I mean, you're still in the middle of the car, but I don't know. I would think the inside would be a little less of a chance of hitting than the outside, maybe. But it was interesting, the replays watching it just hit. I mean, he kept control.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the damage. He damaged it. What I meant was like at least he didn't like have a wreck out or cause others.
Yeah.
It was
It was
it could have been way worse.
it looked minor, but
Yeah.
I mean, I get again at those speeds and stuff, still it's going to mess up the car. But so out in Q1, we had DeVries, we had Sargent, we had Sonoda, we had Norris, and we had Albon. So those were our 5 that were out.
Yeah. And then Hulkenberg had his lap deleted as well, right?
Yes, in Q2, he had his lap deleted in the exact same place that Logan Sargent had his. So, they were at least consistent on that. But
rookie or veteran, right?
Yeah, rookie or veteran. And I mean, he's been out for a little bit, but yeah, that was kind of crazy. But for sure, the biggest news out of Q2 was Max. Done. I think everybody lost their minds when all of a sudden his car just kind of like
and they replaced parts, right? There was
they had to replace his drive shaft. Yeah, so
drive
it was his drive shaft, or that's what Christian Horner was saying. So something went out there.
He talks about it in the race. He starts radioing on the race saying he's hearing something in the drive shaft while his engineers are saying it looks fine. And he keeps talking about he's hearing something with the drive shaft they just replaced.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was able to finish, but because that was towards the end, right? That was, I don't remember what lap that was on, but it was the
last few laps.
And his engineers are like, well, we're not seeing anything. It looks fine, Max. It looks fine. So, but that was huge. But then some other big stuff came out. So, Gasly barely squeaked into Q3 by 0.04 of a second, right there at the very end. You had Zhou, who didn't make it into Q3 and was shy by just 0.05 of a second. So he just barely missed it. And then you have Oscar Piastri, who gets his McLaren into Q3 for the first time. And they were looking pretty quick. Well, at least he was.
And one of them, I forget which one, they were all within 1/100th of a second of each other if you didn't count Max.
Oh, yeah. No, yes, if you did not. So once Max went out, everyone in Q2 was within hundredths of a second. I don't know exactly, but within hundredths of a second of each other. So if you had a race where everybody was that close, could you even imagine? That would be so much fun. But I do like that there's that aspect of it, that so many cars are that close to each other, that you're barely getting into Q3 by 0.04 of a second. You're narrowly missing out. That I do think adds a nice layer this year versus
get some excitement.
Yeah. So out in Q2 we had Max, and then our theme this week is 2x2. So we had Bottas and Zhou were both out, and then K-Mag and Hulkenberg. So the 2 Haas cars, the 2 Alfa Romeos, and Max were out in Q2. And then Q3, obviously Checo on pole, but Leclerc actually was looking good, finishing in Q2.
And then for that penalty.
I know.
It's and the penalties this race. Just so many of them, and the controversy around the penalties.
Yes. Oh, and we'll get to that. We will get to that.
That one was just so disheartening because he did so well. I mean, to get up there and then back 10 positions.
And his partner in crime, Sainz, was not looking good on this track at all. Now I know I put him as my predictions. I thought I was, I don't know, there was 14 different iterations of our like my podium predictions, but he just was not looking good. Like I think he barely squeak into Q2 or Q3. I don't even know what it was, but
Yeah,
like
he got into
stressing him
Q3
out.
because he ended up fifth, but because of Leclerc being pushed down, he ended up fourth. But yeah, he
Yeah.
was fifth in qualifying.
Yeah. So I mean, kind of the opposite of what Leclerc was doing during qualifying. But yeah, so our starting with, like you said, with Charles going back, we had Leclerc, not Leclerc, we had Checo and Fernando on the front row, and then we had Sainz and Russell in row two.
Yeah, Sainz and Russell. That went
Yeah.
Russell's, it went Checo, Alonso, then Russell, and then Sainz.
Yeah. Yes. So I mean, not bad. Not bad at all. And then you had the Alpines were in there, and yeah, it was setting us up for a good race.
Yeah, and it was a good race. It was interesting. It started off, I mean, go into the race, it started off that opening lap. Poor McLaren.
McLaren.
It's interesting that they
Seriously.
were competing for fourth last year, and now
It's like, seriously, I just don't think that it could have been, I mean, any more of an unlucky first lap for them, right? So Gasly, who sometimes I have an issue with his driving because I feel like he causes things to happen like this, bumps into Oscar. Oscar in the first lap drops 11 spots at the beginning because of that. And then poor Lando, all of the debris that did come off those cars when they hit caused him to have to go into the pit. So they both had to replace their front wing on the first lap, which just put them behind. There was just no way they were going to catch up at all.
no. And they ended up 15th and 17th, almost
Yeah.
a 2x2. And
Right.
for people
And
who
we
did
had
2x2,
we had 2 DNFs. So when you take that into account, you're down to 18 cars because we had, who was out? Stroll and Albon, right?
Yeah.
So so then they were 17th and what do you say?
They were they ended up finishing, McLaren ended up finishing 15th and 17th.
15th and 17th. Yep.
Yeah, so they were almost 2x2, and what we keep calling out our 2x2 this week is the two finishing side by side. So the 2x2, the two are side by side.
Yep, the two teammates.
Yeah, the two teammates. So, yeah, it was really interesting. And then, but that ended up being, they ended up, and Lando had to pit twice.
Well, yeah, because they had to come in on the first lap to get that new wing, and then they had to change their tires after that.
Yeah, but he's only one. He pitted twice, and then there's only a couple. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4 drivers that pitted more than once.
Yeah, because it should have been a one-stop race. It should have, you start on the softs or the mediums and go to the hards or whatever. I think is what most teams did. Not everybody, but because I think Lewis started on the hards. I don't remember. I just watched it yesterday, but I am tired.
All right, well, let's move on to interesting, and it's kind of jumping out a little bit, not going straight to a team, but what was really interesting in the orders, which we're just talking about the orders, how far up Max and Charles moved up, like both of them, starting so far back for different reasons, but moving so far up the order. That was amazing.
It was amazing. Like Charles on the opening, like he just split 2 cars. Whoever, I can't remember who the 2 were in front of him on the starting grid, but he just went right up the middle, made up three places instantly. And then
Joe and Nico.
Okay. Yeah, he just went right up the middle and then was just picking him off. And I thought, oh my God, could he seriously get to the podium? This is amazing. And then obviously Max, again, he's starting further back, 3 spaces back, and just picking people off left and right and making it look easy. So
I And we didn't talk about this kind of in our prep, but I wonder with that yellow car, the safety that came out, they talked about how it like bunched everyone up and how
Yeah.
that changed the dynamics of the race, and it really
Yeah.
made some of that a little bit easier, kind of in the end, because it really
Yeah.
shortened the the gaps.
Oh, absolutely. Because Checo was so far ahead of everybody else. And so when that safety car came out, which as an aside, I think you and I talked about this on the phone earlier, but why was there a full safety car? We couldn't even have a virtual safety car. Lance had his car. He
All the way off.
basically had it in
And
the
they talked about
behind the
that.
wall.
Yeah, they
Like,
talked about how well he pulled it off. He completely out of the way. There's
yeah.
no equipment had to come out to get him.
Mm-mm.
Nobody was in danger. It just I don't
Nope.
understand why they did a full safety car on that.
I have no idea, but I mean, now Checo must have been super lonely out there all by himself. Nobody, nobody around him, nobody in front of him. He's just living his life. But it did obviously bunch everybody back up, except for Charles, which we'll get to because his engineer forgot to tell him that Hamilton went into the pits. But it really did. It absolutely puts people together. And then when you start, once the safety car goes in, somebody's quick on the move, they can take over another spot real easy.
Yeah, but Charles ended up moving he had to go down from 12 and finish seventh, and then of course Max moved up to second. So
Yeah,
they both did a sizable move. So that was pretty impressive for them both, right?
yeah, I
Considering.
agree.
But
Yeah,
so let's get to Ferrari, our first 2x2 to talk about. So they finished sixth and seventh.
Ferrari. Yeah. Um, again,
Your
like
team.
Charles did great. He caught up to Carlos by lap 13. So he wasn't like right on Carlos's bumper or anything like that, but Carlos was in fifth. And by lap 13, again, lap 13, Charles had already moved all that way and was in sixth place. So that was amazing. And then just talking about during that safety car, for whatever reason, like Charles was leaving a gap where because he thought Hamilton, I think, was in front of him, and he wasn't. And his engineer came on and said something, and you could just hear the irritation and the frustration in his
Oh,
voice. Like, Javi, you have to tell me these things. Like, come on. Like, again, not quoting, that's paraphrasing, but it was along those lines. And really all Javi could say was copy, you know, copy to the
well,
but it's like, come on, like he probably would have played that a little differently, right? He could have moved up, a lot more. He could have got, is it an undercut? But if he goes, no, I always get those mixed up, undercut and overcut. But he could have, like, while Hamilton was in the pits, he could have gotten up there, and Hamilton could have come out behind him. But
yeah.
they didn't tell him. And I get the frustration. Like poor Charles. Like last year, he had so many issues, and I feel like this is at least the second time, his engineer was not keeping him updated on what's happening or another car coming up behind him or whatever. So
Yeah, because
it
that
just
was a lot of the report out was last year Ferrari. A lot of it was strategy, and so we
yeah.
can't. You got to fix the strategy. If the mechanics, the strategy, the drivers can only do so much if
Yeah.
everything else. It's a multifaceted, process to make a
Exactly.
winning team and a winning effort, right? It's not
Yeah.
one cog breaks.
Yeah. It is crazy. And I feel like as a whole, on so many different levels, this team is just not where they want to be. Obviously, their pace is off. They're slower than Mercedes. They were the fourth fastest car this week. Carlos did not look good on this track at all. Charles was doing his all, but wasn't necessarily getting any help. And then, unfortunately, the safety car was deployed after both cars went in for their hards. So, didn't even get a free stop there. Like it just was not working in their favor. But,
No.
last week we talked about Mercedes after the race. Well, not last week, but after the last race, losing their minds. Like we've got to do better. We know we're not where we want to be. And I heard some of that today from Charles and the team. But I think they need to look in the mirror a little bit harder and really figure out what they're going to do. Because all week I kept hearing the only people that can stop Red Bull, or not necessarily stop them, but give them a challenge, is Ferrari. And I don't think that's true, especially after this week. I don't think that that's going to happen. No.
Yeah, it's not showing that way.
No.
Not at all.
Not at all. So we'll see what happens. Again, Australia, very different track, but we'll see what happens. They've got to figure it out. It's not looking
Yes,
good.
they do.
Not looking
Well,
pretty.
a fun one was that, it was kind of neat, a little sad at the same time. AlphaTauri, that close. Close doesn't really count, but close, right?
Yuki was so close. He was so close. Like, it just at the end, Kevin Magnussen from Haas took that space over. Very old school racing. There was no DRS or anything involved, and just took that point away from Yuki. But he was in there. He was ready. So good. But he did a really good job, I think, overall, of sticking close to that top 10 throughout the entire race. So, that was great. Nick DeVries, I don't even know. Where did he finish up? Oh, no, he finished. Where did he finish?
DeVries finished 14th.
Okay.
So, about 3 behind. I know it's not the order he said, but you mentioned it, so I'm going to mess up our order just a little bit. So, that means Haas got their first point.
Haas got their first point. Kevin Magnussen pulled it out, got that first point. They are very excited, as I was seeing today on their social media. They're very excited for their first point. They're off the 0 board and onto the board. But I think that, Hulkenberg, he did really great in, qualifying. I think, again, that they have that, they can do a fast lap. They just are really, again, need to be working on their overall race pace for an entire race. But where did Hulkenberg finish? 12th?
Hulkenberg finished 12th. Yeah. And so, I'm glad they got their point, but that broke our 2x2, because we would have had a 2x2 if Kevin hadn't pushed his way up. It would have had another little 2x2. He or if Hulkenberg could have pushed up, but Hulkenberg was like, I think, almost 3 seconds behind Yuki. So there's no way.
Yeah, he wasn't going to make it. But no, so that's exciting for Haas. They're on the board. I do think, I don't know that necessarily they're quite at a mid-level. They're like so close. I wouldn't necessarily call them the bottom teams, but they're kind of like lower midfield. But they're still working at it, and I think that's good. They're getting there.
Progress. It's good progress.
Yeah.
Progress. Well, yeah, and it's neat to see that. And I don't know if the cost cap is helping, or just continuing working at it, and good attitude and just progress, right? Just keep effort at it, which is nice.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I'm going to harp on our 2x2, and there's not much to say about the team. Not a lot of good or bad or anything. But Alpine is a 2x2 team. They get 8th and 9th, and I know you added them to your fantasy team this week, but that was pretty cool. They got 8th and 9th. So you got some points, double points for the team. So that's nice.
I think they were both really pretty steady, and I think I kept thinking, well, Gasly's showing more than Ocon, and then Ocon would be would finish higher, and I'm like, okay, well maybe Ocon's showing more than Gasly, but I can't wait to see them in Australia. I think it's going to be fun. I think that they are finding that pace, and they're figuring it out. So I think they could easily be in there in the mix for that midfield.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I feel really bad about Williams, though. I mean, I want to pull for that team. I really like the team.
I love
as a whole, and I mean, a lot of it's because of the history of the team and whatnot, and just there's just so much. Just what we talked earlier about, Logan and everything that happened leading up to the race, and then poor Albon. I mean, just
there was nothing he could do. But I thought it was so weird that he told the team, like, I have a brake failure, and then he speeded up.
They kept going. Even the commentators are like, why did he pass pit? Like, he said that and then he passed the pits. Like,
And right before that, though, it was like he was speeding up. He was racing somebody else. I don't even remember who it was, if it was his teammate or who. And it's like, wait, you just said you had a brake failure and you're going into these turns. Like, but I'm with you. I feel bad for them. They are my little engine that can. I love Williams. I love Albon. I think Sargent is going to end up having a really good rookie season, but just bad luck. Bad luck there.
Yeah, I told my partner he should like Albon because we've got a connection to Thailand, so got a little connection there. So
yes,
my mother-in-law is Thai, so
Yeah.
gotta root for Albon there.
exactly. I love him. He's just so funny. Cute.
Well, we mentioned Bottas a little bit, and we go to Alfa Romeo. That's oddness with that team this week, right? I mean, it's just
I don't even know. I don't know. So I had shared with you. I was watching. So I watch all my stuff on F1 TV, and Saturday, I just could not get enough F1. So I watched a show that they do. It's a 20-minute, show about Saudi Arabia and what was going to happen in the Grand Prix, and just talking about what might go on. And they had mentioned how, it was evening and there's a curfew. So, teams at a certain point, once a curfew hits, they have to all go home, like done for the night. And they also cannot close their garage doors if they're working. Like the garage doors have to be open. And they said, Alfa Romeo, their garage doors are shut. They've been shut. They went home a while ago. We don't know. So they said they must be feeling really confident with the car, but that is not what looks.
No. I mean,
like
you had Bottas basically last with the lap.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was the entire race. Pretty much.
And he pitted 3 times.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
3 times.
Oh, I did not know that. He was so far down. Like I just kept thinking, like, well, where's Bottas? And he was always at the bottom. And I
didn't realize that.
I
didn't realize that either. So I was just looking at the stats while we're sitting here talking. I'm trying to remember why so many times. I can't even remember.
Nope, I have no clue. I mean, you had mentioned he did say something towards the end of the race about his car. Like, he thought there was something wrong with it.
Yeah, it's just they just did not have a good, and even 13, they I don't even call that close, but
yeah.
All right, well let's get into the last few. So pretty good. Another 2x2 Mercedes. They're showing good. They're showing really good.
They did.
And they were what, 4th and 5th? Yeah.
4th and 5th. Yep. And George very steady. Lewis right behind him. I feel like Lewis was pretty steady, right? Like,
yeah,
I think at one point he would put something.
I had to go back and look for a second. I thought that Lewis had finished ahead of Russell. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Russell actually finished ahead of Hamilton, which was great.
Yeah.
And of course, when we get into the whole podium penalty debacle, but George Russell is definitely becoming a favorite of mine, just mainly because of how all that was handled. Because, when that happened, which we'll get to in a second, but just how he handled things, because post-show, we talked about it last time, that you talked about how they're all trained how to deal with the media and whatnot, and they're in their faces, right, asking and things. And I watched all the post-show commentary on F1 TV, and they were, as soon as they announced the 10-second penalty on Fernando, they were already on George Russell's face asking, what do you think? You now have 3rd and you've got podium and all that. And he was pretty chilled about it. I don't have the quotes, but he was pretty much like, it just doesn't seem right. It was over an hour and we just kind of let it play out and see what happens. Like he just wasn't out there beating his chest and cheering, yay, I got 3rd. What, he seemed to kind of just take it in stride and give the respect to Fernando of what he'd accomplished of, 100th win, right? And letting it play out. I kind of like the adage, don't catch chicken before they hatch, right? And he let it play out. So
yeah,
I really respect that. For a younger person in the sport, I just really just appreciated that kind of respect he showed.
Yeah.
Because you just don't see that across all of the drivers, certainly we
No.
know.
And
Um,
I agree with you. I think, George to me has shown, like last year was Joe's accident. He was out of his car racing across. Like
exactly.
there's things that he has now, there's things that George has done like on the track that I'm not a huge fan of, but off the track, I think you can tell like he cares about people. He is gonna be somewhat low key about things. And he's got very good manners, the English manners.
Yeah, I really am impressed with that, so
Yeah.
that's been neat to watch.
Yes.
So like, I'm gonna have to really pay attention to him and become a fan, right? It's just
Yeah.
that a lot of times it's the attitude and the behavior that I respect. It's doesn't cost anything to be kind, right?
No.
And I like to see that kindness. It's a good thing for people to respect, and I can
Exactly.
definitely respect that.
Yep.
Um,
Agreed.
and you pointed out they're actually tied with Aston Martin in the Constructors' Cup.
They are. Now, granted, they're many, like 50 points or 40 something points behind Red Bull, but Aston Martin and Mercedes are tied for second in the constructors. Insane. Like, first,
Not
who would have
Ferrari.
thought Aston Martin? And after last week, you would think Mercedes had 0 points and they're tied for second in the constructors. And
Yeah.
Ferrari is fourth.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
at all what we would have thought.
and how does all that play out? Well, let's see. Let's get into Aston Martin. Stroll.
Stroll. Poor
Poor
Stroll.
Stroll. No
Honestly,
points.
like I've never been like a huge Stroll as a driver fan. I think Stroll as a person seems pretty cool. But on lap 18, that's what pulled out that full safety car that we were talking about. But I think what they were saying is it was a reduction in energy recovery. So something was just not quite working right, and he had to DNF. He didn't finish, which is disappointing because they both looked so good in practice and they both looked so good in qualifying. And I actually kind of thought, like, what if, and one of my iterations of our podium prediction thing I did for our Instagram page was Lance on the podium. Not first, but I thought he could be my third place person. So I
Yeah,
had
he
a lot
was
of high expectations for
fifth on
them.
the fifth in qualifying, so he started fourth on the grid, right?
Yeah.
Because of the
Wait, did he
Leclerc
start
plan.
fourth?
So,
No, he would have started. No, I think he started fifth because it was Signs and
oh, that's right.
Russell. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, he started fifth. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong page. Yeah. So he started fifth. I was looking at the starting grid, thinking I was looking at qualifying. You're right.
Yeah, but third row, like that's awesome.
That's
I was
amazing. Yeah, he had such a
expecting.
chance. And he was driving very well. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I think Fernando was it one of the first few turns where he took over. He beat Checo. It was like leading the race for that short time. That was great. I love to see it. I was hoping for a real feisty first turn, but it's a short run up on that course to that first turn, but so good until Checo got away, but we'll talk more about that. But tell me, so Fernando's one of your favorite drivers. Tell me your thoughts about everything that happened.
That was just so crazy. I mean, one, it was kind of funny listening to the all the commentators. They asked him like almost every time. Everyone talked to him about, oh, so being such a new driver, you didn't line up right to begin with. And the way he took it, again, he called himself the bad boy, and he's so polite about everything.
Yeah.
But he had the penalty, and so during the safety, he took it in the pit, and he waits, and all the replays were like, "What's the problem? What's the problem?" And first they were talking about, did he wait long enough? And I'm like, 1,000, 2 1,000. I'm like, wait a minute, I count at least 8 or 9. Wait a minute, they waited more than 5 seconds. What am I missing? I know I'm new, but is there a delay before? And then it got to the touching, and they're all zooming in, and it got down to the jack.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know all the rules, but okay, that's it. And then Instagram is flooded about how he gets up there, they award it, and then they take it away after the celebration. But why an hour later? Why? Because during the race, in that last couple of laps where he is which I still don't understand why he just let it go that many seconds behind. Like if they've got the second faster car, why wasn't he pushing harder? They come across and they tell him, his team's like, hey, you may want to just go ahead and push it a little harder just to make sure you have at least 5 seconds ahead, just in case we do get assessed the 5 seconds. And they say we didn't, spend it right. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. I'm screaming, let's get it. Let's get the 5 seconds. Cause it was like 4.95, 4.95. Like, get the 5 seconds. And if they had told them sooner that they were going to assess a 10-second, I think he would have, pushed it even harder and got the extra 5 seconds. And
absolutely,
that's where it's like, why do you want to run it so close? That's just so scary.
Yeah. I think it is. It's scary, but I think he knows that Russell's not going to gain on him, right? And Russell was hoping, because that was one of the things at one point, I think shortly after the safety car, Russell was telling his team, hey, Fernando has a 5-second penalty. He still has to, serve that. So, he's thinking we've got, right now we've got this 5-second. And they're like, no, George, he already served it. He already served it.
Yeah. And then they were questioning that. They were like, did he serve it right? What did he serve? Right. And they were like, we'll just get on him just in case. And that was going back and forth. So there was a lot of that controversy. But the article on F1 is that the Aston Martin team submitted proof that there were 7 instances where while serving a penalty in the pit, the jack had touched the car and an additional 10-second penalty was not charged. And so basically they came back and said that there's proof that there's not been an agreement that the jack touching the car constitutes a penalty. And so they reversed it and came back. Like I said, it was pretty nice how George Russell handled it. And I think Fernando, the ones that I've seen, he was handling it pretty well too. In the sense of he was like, well, I'm just gonna let my team deal with it. The car drove well, the team did well, because immediately right after, again, reporters, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
And I mean, this is kind of a side, but I just thought about this, but because I know I saw George or Mercedes posted a photo with George with the trophy. So who goes and gets the trophy from Fernando and then takes it over to the Mercedes trailers?
It was 4 hours later that they announced that it went back. So you have it for 4 hours. It's crazy.
So then somebody has to go from George's thing, who's probably left the track, and then get the trophy back again, and then take it back to the Aston Martin people. I want to know how that works. Where's the cameras when that's going on?
And if they engrave anything, you have to scratch it out and then re-engrave it. So the new sticker.
The engraver's pissed. He's like, God damn it. No, I thought all of that was it was so crazy. But yay for Fernando. That was reinstated. So he has his 100th podium.
100
Huge.
podiums.
He's only the 6th driver in F1 history to have 100 podiums. And I think that's pretty damn cool. He's amazing. Up there with Lewis and Kimi and Sebastian. Who else am I forgetting? Probably Schumacher. So I thought that was great. I just think that it's a little crazy, all that stuff, right? I think the Aston Martin team, good for them for being on it and, finding their 7 teams or 10 teams that this didn't happen in the past, major props to the research person on that. But then I think it's there's so much controversy about how F1 applies penalties, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes it's this, and sometimes it's that. And then, I mean, before, when you used to be able to call, it was Michael Massey at the time during the race, and we know this with Christian Horner, especially the Red Bull team, Toto Wolff, calling during the race, Michael, have you seen my email? Michael, did you get, answer your phone? To me, it just seems okay, so a penalty applies, but it can also be taken away if you give us enough proof. I just feel how can we trust them? But that's
and then to wait an hour after when it happened at race 8, the lap 18, and there was 32 more laps. There's so much time that it could have been dealt with. It was all the technology. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, we could go on that forever. So let's get on to Red Bull. Yes. Our last 2x2. We already talked about Max's move from 15th to second. All right. Checo. Oh my gosh. He's
Yay
amazing.
for Checo! His fifth win in F1. Hooray for him.
Checo.
Like we said, he was at the front, probably lonely as all get out. I think by lap 35, he was 5 seconds or almost 5 seconds ahead of Max. So he had a really comfortable window, right? Like they are dominating. I think once a Red Bull, whoever it is, once Red Bull is in front, nobody is catching them. Nobody can keep up, not even their other Red Bull. It just they're just out there. So to me, Checo was really in charge this whole race. There was that one little part where Fernando led, but he was in charge the entire way. So now we have each Red Bull has a win, right? So Max has a win. Here's our 2x2 again. There's 2 races. Red Bull has 2 wins. Each driver has a win. So the question is, and this kind of, I feel like came into play, which we're going to talk about, but does Red Bull do team orders? Is Max your number 1 driver? Yeah. Is Checo, are you going to let him duke it out? Because I think Checo was kind of under the impression that, he had the fastest lap. He is winning this race. And then there was some interesting team radios going on towards the end there.
I thought it was interesting because when Max was asking about what's the fastest lap, and they were pretty much like not quoting it word for word, like, don't worry about it. And he's like, but I am, he wanted to know. And I get the competitiveness, but like, come on, man, you can't let him let your teammate like one race right. Have the lead. One race. Yeah. He's worked so hard and he's done this, and you have to, I don't know. It just,
but I think that's where
it was an unfair thing. Like if you're pushing it and he's not knowing that you're going to push it and he's thinking we're being fair and keeping it where it's at, that's one thing. But if he'd known you were pushing it, I think Checo could have beat him.
Yeah. I think Checo would have had the fastest lap for sure if he had known. So that's where I think the argument comes in, because you have people that say, well, Max is a champion. This is why Checo is not going to be a champion. Max is, of course, going to go for the fastest lap because he wants to win everything. He wants to win the race. I think he was a little pissy that he didn't win the race. He wants the fastest lap. And, Checo does too. But, I think, like you said, Checo thought that there was kind of not necessarily a team order, but just like, everybody maintain where you're at. So even though then the engineers came on and said, push, go ahead and, push it. But that was after Checo asked again. So some of the team radio. So here's what Checo's engineer said. Target is 32.6 plus 0.4. Checo says, is Max doing the same? The engineer comes back and says, Max's last lap is 32.6. And he said, so, why are you telling me to do 33? And I think it was shortly after that the engineer said, go ahead and push it. You can push it. But who knows? So after the race, Checo says, they told me, meaning his team, his engineers, told me I had the fastest lap and to keep a certain pace. So I thought the communication was the same to Max. We need to review this because I got certainly different information. And if you were watching F1 TV and they interview the drivers pretty much as soon as they get weighed, they get out of their cars, they weigh themselves, which they have to do after every race. And they interviewed Checo, and the reporter said to him, so Max snatched fastest lap for you at the very end. And the look on Checo's face was complete surprise, utter shock. And you see him kind of look off of camera, and he is kind of like, okay, then
processing
he was
processing like what happened. Yeah.
Right. He was floored that happened. And then we saw in the driver's room afterwards, Max sitting in Checo's chair. But Max says to Checo, did I get the fastest lap? And Checo says, weren't you told to maintain like your pace? And it's kind of like, Max is like, whatever. I asked what the fastest lap was, and I was only he said a 10th. It was only a 10th faster than us. Well, that was Checo's fastest lap. So to me, I mean, I get the whole, like, you want to be a champion, you got to go for it. But I also think, like, based on what happened last year, towards the end of last year, this is not helping situation. Even if they want to say we're kumbaya in the team, the fans are not buying it. The fans are noting it off.
No, you can hear it. And I think we talked before too about the time that, Max chose not to be on the Netflix show is putting in a bad light. Like, no, you're putting yourself in a bad light. It's there. That's not edited. That was live. And that was pretty obvious when you asked specifically who had the fastest lap. They told you don't worry about it. And you're like, oh, but I am.
Yeah.
And they were trying to keep it copacetic and just to keep it as it was. And then you had to push it. So it's, I mean, I get a competition, but then let's make it fair, right? If you're going to push, then it needed to be an all-out push for both teams and say, let's talk about up front. All right, if we're both in this position, then we both agree we're both going to just push it, all the way to the end to see who can do it.
Yeah.
To make that up front. Don't do it at the end. To me, it was shady.
Yeah. I think it was shady too. And I do, like I said, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens at least over the next few races to see what Red Bull does. You've got two winners. There's two races, and Checo won that decidedly. I know Max won the first one by what we were saying, like 11 seconds, or it was a lot of seconds. Checo, this one, I don't even know. But what are you going to do? Are you going to make Max your number one and sacrifice Checo again? Or is Checo saying, heck no, not after last year, and I'm going to do what I need to do?
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
All right. Well, I'm going to just touch quickly because we are definitely a long one this time because there's just so much to talk about. Talk about our fantasy teams. Last piece of the 2x2. You were first and second. I am fourth and fifth. So 2 of our 3 teams. So more 2x2.
I've got to go check. I've got to go check it. All day I meant to go check my scores because, like I said, I switched up my teams once Alpine, was doing pretty well, and I had a different constructor. I didn't even remember who. So I got to check it out.
Do that properly. Work was just so busy. I just sitting right over my head. Yeah. So, and then another 2. We get 2 more weeks before the next race, right?
Yes. So our next race is Australia. It's going to definitely be another different track, different than Jeddah, different than Bahrain. So we'll talk about that a little bit more next time. We'll get into, what maybe we can expect for Australia. We can talk about tires because that in our grid basics is one thing, we haven't talked about yet. And there's some new Pirelli tires, so we can talk about that. We've got some other fun stuff going on. So
anything our listeners might suggest between now and then?
Absolutely. Whatever they want.
And we're getting closer and closer to the in-person race for the 2 of us. So
I know. I heard yesterday they said that's the 8th round, and I'm like, wow, we're already heading on to the 3rd round. So and they've made some changes at that track, which we'll talk about before Spain. But that's going to be really interesting because they took out a chicane actually right where we're sitting. So I think that'll be really fun. So,
well, it's good to see you as always. We're both going to get some sleep because it's late for both of us, and we'll be seeing everyone next week. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and a review. To stay up to date with She Loves the Grid and get all the behind-the-scenes content, you can follow us on Instagram at She Loves the Grid and on Facebook at facebook.com/She Loves the Grid. Thank you for joining us for the ride this week.